Hello and welcome to episode number 2 of domestic terrorism in Canada, and in this case specifically Toronto. Today I'm going to talk about some of the problems that we have with respects to how our governments are very much involved in this, whether they realize it or know it or not. I'm here to tell you today that when we have domestic terrorism, obviously the government is doesn't want to have that, but just what role do they play in making this happen? I'm going to hopefully I can answer that today. I'm also going to show you a couple of examples today of how the government knows that it's going on, but they're actually allowing this to continue. And I'm saying this because you would think that if a person is involved in terrorism of any kind, that simple things like travel, as one example, is something that they would monitor very closely, very carefully. You would also think that based on the way intelligence is gathered today through social media, that again, these people would be very closely monitored and their activities significantly curtailed. Now, in fairness, the government has done a reasonably good job in putting a stop to many things. Obviously, the Toronto 18 is one example, is something that was found and stopped before anything happened. That could have been absolutely catastrophic if something did happen over there. So yes, the government did make use of good intelligence and good police work, good detective work to catch these people and to put a stop to their abilities. Air India example, not so much. This did happen. It happened with people who were living here in Canada, still are in Canada. But I want to talk about Toronto a little bit because this is kind of where a lot of stuff is focused. I told you in part 1 that I was naming names, pointing fingers. Well, the first name I'm going to name today for you is a guy named Syed Hassan. Syed Hassan is probably the number 2 top anarchist / Antifa in Canada. He's right here in Toronto, and he runs an organization called No One Is Illegal here out of Toronto, and I believe another one called the Migrant Solidarity Network. That office is located at 720 Spadina Road. That's just Spadina, just south of Bloor Street. Oddly enough, it's the building right behind and just south of a major Jewish center here in Toronto. Mr. Hassan has, in many cases, used social media to spread a lot of his hate, asking people to steal things, asking people to burn items, preferably in stores. But this seems to have completely gone over the heads of our Toronto law enforcement and our security agencies. At least it would appear that way. Mr. Hassan is not a Canadian citizen. Mr. Hassan is what is known here in Canada as a permanent resident, or he holds a PR card. That is not citizenship. That could be revoked at any time, and he could be deported as a result of a plethora of crimes. And you would think that counseling to commit arson, counseling to commit theft would be 2 great examples of crimes that, he would get booted out for. But that seems to have gone well over the heads of many of our law enforcement and government officials. Mr. Hassan also seems to enjoy the idea of giving grandiose speeches, asking for people to become, and I quote, enemies of the state. Terrorists are enemies of the state. Yet there he is, advocating that. That's on a video that you're going to see right here.
We must seize the farms and the factories. We must must become the enemies so that in this city everyone can live with food, shelter, dignity. We must become the enemies that sow terror in their hearts so that laws like C-51 shrivel away. We must celebrate our way of life, what they call barbaric cultural practices, on our streets and in our homes until their way of life dissipates under our feet. Let us become enemies. Let us organize. Let us win. We cannot wait. Freedom is calling. This is what these deaths demand of us. Let us be enemies.
So the question that I have is, why is him and other people like him simply allowed to stay in Canada, especially when they're not Canadian citizens, and continue on with their hate rhetoric, their anarchist rhetoric, and quite frankly their domestic terrorist rhetoric? This seems to go on unchecked. Well, I'm going to name a few other names as well, but it seems to me that we have a government here in Toronto, specifically our current elected mayor and city councillors, that seem to have no problem with this kind of nonsense going on. And I dare say that in fact they very likely have instructed police to simply leave these people alone and not bother them. So these people are now going ahead and doing stuff like this with complete immunity, without any possible resistance from law enforcement, from city officials. And the more they get away with it, the more brazen they get. Another example of a person who has no business traveling internationally is a guy named Dave Vassy. I'll get to him in a minute. But let me just backtrack to Syed Hussein. Remember I said Syed Hussein is not a Canadian citizen. I've also mentioned that Syed Hussein has gone on record through social media and on videos advocating crimes and asking people to rise up and become enemies of the state. Yet, Syed Hussein left Canada for 6 months to go to, of all places, Pakistan, one of the #1 places of terrorist activity in the world, where many international terrorists are coming from. How does he go there unchecked? How does he come back unchecked? This is something that this is not accidental. This is, in my opinion, incompetence by our government officials and a willingness to allow people like him to continue on to do this. I mentioned Dave Vassy earlier. Dave Vassy is one of the first people who got arrested at the Toronto G20 for trying to cross a secure line. Dave Vassy is a well-known, and I refer to him as a domestic terrorist as well. He's an anarchist, he's an Antifa idiot. He's basically against absolutely anything that you can possibly imagine that is logical and sensible. He's been arrested on countless occasions, right up to even a couple of weeks prior to me shooting this video right now. Yet, during the Occupy movement, when Dave Vassy was one of the head organizers of Occupy, already having a rather lengthy arrest record, how does Dave Vassy manage to get himself to New York City, as depicted here, with his lady friend Lana Goldberg and one of the originators of Occupy, Brian Batty. Brian Batty doesn't have any record that I'm aware of. But again, this just shows that the government is completely inept at keeping track of these people, either willingly or unwillingly. I don't know the answer to that. But as long as people like this are able to continue on with their activities, we're never ever going to be able to put a stop to this, because our government is simply not going to put a stop to this. They don't want to. It's this kind of obvious. And when you have Toronto City Council who knows that this is going on and are basically telling the police to back down. This is wrong. How do I know that they're telling the Toronto police to back down? Very simple. Some months ago I had a conversation with a really good friend of mine, a Toronto police sergeant. He told me, and this actually took place just slightly before the Toronto G20 of 2010, there was a rather large Tamil uprising on the Gardiner Expressway here. Tamil, this is a group that is in full support of the Tamil Tigers. He was told not to engage these people and to simply let them be. As a result of that inaction that was forced upon them, a great many Toronto police officers who are members of our so-called riot squad or public order unit turned in their gear because they felt that they were completely roadblocked from carrying out the duties that they were sworn to do. This happened during the G20 as well, when riots were breaking out but police were seemingly just standing by doing a whole lot of nothing. They were told not to engage, not to do anything. We have a problem. We have a real government problem here with their complete ineptness. Trudeau, of course, is our current Prime Minister, is absolutely not helping the situation. And I want you to listen to what he said as he addressed the so-called people of ISIS wanting to come back here, where he's practically welcoming them back. If you don't think we have a problem, take a look at this video and you'll see where the problem starts. Thank you very much. Next episode, we'll be talking about Alex Hundert, and you're going to want to stay tuned for that one. Thank you and have a great day.
The Liberal Party believes that terrorists should get to keep their Canadian citizenship. Because I do. And I'm willing to take on anyone who disagrees with that. The Liberal Party believes that terrorists should get to keep their Canadian citizenship. Because I do. And I'm willing to take on anyone who disagrees with that.